welcome to the history lessons in Wikipedia world. Today we're starting a new lesson. This time we are continuing from life before agriculture to the Neolithic Revolution, and we're going to see what changed and what actually made this innovation happen, why it was possible. We're talking about a change that happened more than 10,000 years ago, and that is the most significant single development in human history. It divides historical periods and was developed independently in separate parts of the world. The one that we're going to be studying today and in the next lessons is what it's called the Fertile Crescent. Here is where we have the first remains and the first proof of people using agriculture. The Neolithic Revolution was not something that poof, just happened in a couple of days. There was a progressive change that went from nomadic hunter-gathering to sedentary settlements, first with plant domestication, and lastly we'll see animal domestication. This area, the Fertile Crescent, was really rich because of its water resources and the type of land that we find here. That all the rivers had constant flood, well, not constant, but regular floods, so that made all the earth and the land next to them really fertile. So people here were the first ones that we know about. The domestication of plants and animals actually requires much more labor than hunting and gathering. So the population didn't give in to these changes just from a whim. The right conditions had to take place so they would make it comfortable enough and worth for them. This was made possible thanks to especially changes in the climate and how the availability of resources came to increase exponentially. The pattern then spread across the Middle East region where it all started. The Fertile Crescent is in this, as we saw before, in the part that we call now the Middle East. So we actually have this divided in various periods: Paleolithic, nomadic, Ice Age, what we've been talking about in the last lessons about life before agriculture, and then progressively there are different cultures and different moments where settlements and the changes go increasing and spreading throughout the world. As we said, the climate was changing and becoming warmer and wetter. The conditions were way milder. Before it was Ice Age. There was lots of areas where you could only gather wild fruit in forests and hunt. Now the conditions are milder, and that made forests spread around the Mediterranean coast like wildfire. Wow. And wild animals proliferated extraordinarily, making it easier to hunt and easier to find, for example, wild cereals like wheat or barley. It was really, really easy to get hold of your basic nutrition. So having such an easy access to these resources meant that the nomad hunter-gatherer lifestyle, these societies, didn't need to move around constantly to find the food. So what did they do? They started to build settlements, as it was no longer the case that they needed to keep on moving to feed themselves. Archaeologists have found these first settlements, these first constructions in places like Jericho and Abu Hurayra, and they are round pit houses. They look a bit like the temporary huts you would build in the forest, but better, increased. We will go into them more later on. What we know about these groups is that they focused intensively on this wild wheat and barley, as well as hunting gazelles and deer, basically. The fact that they were increasingly depending more and more on wild cereals actually made them start developing technology to harvest the grain and to keep it. And what happens when you get abundance of resources? Yes, exactly. Population increases. So, just to recap a moment, people started having increased resources. It was more comfortable, less difficult to find them. So they start settling in rich parts where they have access to these resources. Having so many resources, and being in a comfortable settlement, the population increases. People are well fed, there's less malnutrition, it's less dangerous to be hunting animals because there's so many, so you can actually choose the easier ones, so there are less accidents. Children will live longer if their mothers are well fed. And you have more children if you actually live longer too. So there was an incredible increase in population at this moment. And everything would have stayed the same if the conditions had kept. People would have had their settlements and just continued gathering and hunting because that was the comfortable choice. But, as we know, things never stay the same, and about 9000 BCE, there was another climatic fluctuation, but this one made conditions drier and cooler. So there was a decrease in the resources of wild cereal. Remember, we said the population of these settlements depended a lot on this wild cereal. So it actually had dire consequences. The population had increased exponentially, but now they had a large number of people to feed and less food. The food was decreasing in numbers. So they had two solutions. First one, well, return to this nomadic style and keep on searching for clusters of food, moving constantly every time one part or one cluster of where they can gather starts to decrease also. But there's another solution. Actually, solution number 2. Take care and increase the productivity of the wild plants that you actually have. Also, you can save the seeds from one year to another and start planting them to make sure you will have these plants during the year. Instead of just waiting for nature to do this work, you make sure these plants will come up. Sounds familiar? Of course. Here is where agriculture started. You observed how the plants worked. You discovered that actually seeds made plants grow, and you made sure that these plants were there for when you needed. That was the very start. Later on, you will start having herding animals, but still we have to say agriculture will always keep on being the base. From now on, agriculture becomes the base for the majority of humans, okay? But they all kept coexisting with many nomadic groups, especially in places where there was absence of horse or herd animals. Like America, there will be nomadic hunting. That was really kept for a long time. There were no horses in America. Bear in mind that they came on later. And so, as we were saying, herding animals did rise thanks to sedentary lifestyle and its consequence of animal domestication that we'll see deeper in the following lessons. But this animal domestication made also this strong competitor to agriculture that was really effective for less fertile lands. The places that were more semi-arid, they adapted very well to a nomadic style with domesticated animals because they could continuously move around searching for better pastures for the animals. So you combine an innovation that comes with agriculture, actually, and the settlements with the nomadic style of other groups that were keeping that, plus the need to find another solution for places that you could actually not cultivate. As said, this proliferated especially in areas like Central Asia and the Sahara Desert in Africa, savanna zones in East and South Africa too. These groups of population actually, they developed different strategies and characteristics. They were normally well versed in military skills. They were more roughly brought up. These abilities were due to the harshness of this environment they were living in. But it was also handy because we said that they coexisted with agriculture based population and settlements, but these nomadic groups, they actually had to either trade with the population in the settlements, or most frequently engage in hostilities with the sedentary based communities. We see examples of this kind of groups with horse riding nomads like the Mongols that destroyed powerful kingdoms and continued to be throughout history, even though agriculture was well developed by the time, populations and settlements were towns, everything was way more developed than before. Still, nomadic culture has always been there. Other examples are the trade caravans in the Arab Peninsula that ended up founding Islamic civilizations. There has always been a smaller percentage of the world population that maintained this nomadic lifestyle, but it actually has only been recently, with the Industrial Revolution and post-colonial times, that they have decreased or completely disappeared in many countries. Until then, you always had these nomadic groups moving around. So although we put a lot of emphasis on this revolution, this Neolithic revolution and agriculture, not everyone chose this solution. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. This is just an introduction, and we will start going into the different parts that we've mentioned briefly in this introduction. We're going to go deeper and look at every little bit that made this Neolithic revolution possible. See you in the next lesson.